Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Bend, Don't Break, Building Resilient Voice Networks for Contact Centers. Before we begin, I'd like to start off with just a few housekeeping reminders for today. So we do have all lines muted during this webinar just to prevent any background noise that might occur. And please enter all your questions into the Q&A box. It should be to the right of your screen. And we are going to reserve some time at the end of the webinar to answer Q&A questions. So please feel free to put those questions in at any time during this webinar, and we'll get to it at the end. And finally, you will be receiving a recording of this webinar over the next few days, so just be on the lookout for that as well. But we'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Nellie Galindo. I'm a solution marketing manager here at Bandwidth, working with our enterprise portfolio. And I'm joined by my incredibly knowledgeable colleague, Brockman, who is our senior director of product management at Bandwidth. We're both so grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you all today. And we look forward to spending this time together to discuss best practices for building resilience in your voice channel for your contact center. So before we begin, I did want to give a brief introduction to Bandwidth if you aren't familiar with us. We are a communications cloud that delivers voice, messaging, emergency services, and provides access to phone numbers around the world. And businesses use our communications cloud to access an owned and operated all IP network. So Bandwidth is one of the largest carriers in the United States for both voice and messaging services. And we're a trusted platform behind all of the Gartner Magic Quadrant UC and CC platforms. But we also sell direct to enterprise as well. We have coverage in over 65 countries, covering over 93% of the global GDP. And we provide services to some of the largest multinational brands. But what really makes us unique is that we're truly a hybrid between a traditional telecom carrier and a communications platform as a service or CPaaS provider. We have our owner-operated network, and we make that network consumable with our software that gives our customers the ability to manage their telephony through an API-first platform. And you can find out more about us at bandwidth.com. All right. So I want to quickly go over just some of the learning objectives that we have for you all today. We are going to be talking about resilience in our voice network, specifically within the contact center. And first, we'll be discussing why voice remains such a critical channel for customer issue resolution in the modern contact center. Even in the face of advancing AI technology and increasing adoption of things like chatbots, there's still some very strong evidence to suggest that fortifying your voice channel is still best practice across your customer experience strategy. Next, we'll talk about some of the benefits of choosing and controlling your contact center telephony. And then finally, we'll discuss some practical strategies for ensuring that your voice infrastructure is resilient and secure. So I'm going to pass it off to Lauren first to kick us off.
Thank you. So we always like to start out with a little bit of data to set the context of what we're going to talk about today. And I think because we are specifically talking about voice today in contact centers, it's important to understand that voice is still really important. You know, there was this whole time when we all thought, especially with Gen X, hey, they don't like to talk to people. You know, we don't want to talk on the phone. It's all going to go to messaging. It's going to be messaging. And the bottom line is that is not true. And if anything, with AI, that trend seems to be stalling or reversing. So 53% of all interactions in the contact center today are handled through inbound voice calls. I mean, that's still a statistic that's, still there. It's been there, and it's not going anywhere. 52% of customers still prefer speaking to a real human for customer support. This is especially true for things that are complex, and of course there are demographic overlays with that, but the channels that customers use to engage with companies, I mean, the concept of omnichannel is absolutely real, and I think all of us know that, right? There's probably all of us that that work with our various vendors and work with our various companies that we like to do business with in every one of these formats, but you can see phone still number 2 on this list, second only to email. Email is also a very cost-effective platform. It's easy to leave it in the stack because it doesn't cost very much. But the bottom line is you cannot get rid of the phone in the customer service experience. So let's talk about what happens if your voice channel isn't performing. Your voice channel is really your brand reputation. Again, this is data from a 2025 study. 70% of customers form their perception of a brand based on the voice interactions. So it's really important that you have a good customer service experience with good agents on the other end to make sure you can handle your customers' problems. Voice also equals trust. Voice is the most emotionally rich and trust-building channel. So AI is getting incredibly good, leaps and bounds with inference, with voice inflections, with emotional intelligence, but it's not there yet. It is not the same as having a human agent for some especially for things that are controversial or frustrating or difficult for your customers. Any of the hard things, the voice channel is still the preferred channel. Voice also is a competitive advantage because if you do it well, your customers are loyal because of it. And I think we see that with the certain brands that are known for their customer service, and without fail, every single one of those brands has a fantastic voice channel. So Nellie, I think I'm going to toss it back over to you for the next couple, and then we'll start talking about some of the details.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lauren. So when we think about that voice channel, and thank you for setting the stage so beautifully of just why so important it is, there are certain things that you can do and certain decisions that you can make that will either make you highly susceptible to outages or they're going to buffer you. But the first thing we want to do is just talk about where in the call flow process a call has the potential to fail. So the first place we see is if something is happening to the originating carrier network. If something happens to that network, the call has to get rerouted from that wireless carrier to your contact center or network carrier. But then one thing to consider is how solid is that carrier's network itself? If you're relying on a single carrier, anytime they have an outage, that's going to directly impact your contact center. And anytime you change carriers, any piece of that chain of command could potentially fail. And then you potentially have issues with that handoff from the carrier network into your contact center's network. So there's a lot of failure spots. And what we want to do next is actually look into some specific examples and reasons of why those calls can fail at any point in that chain. And so the first reason we see are natural disasters. Unfortunately, this is something that's becoming increasingly more common. Things like floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, other natural disasters that can obviously disrupt the infrastructure and cause network outages. From what we've even seen here in our home state of North Carolina, where Hurricane Helene caused unprecedented amounts of damage, days after the hurricane hit, about 370 of North Carolina's 1,400 cell sites were completely out due to lack of power. And so some of counties that were really hard hit had 10% or fewer functional cell sites. And then, of course, along the same lines, we also see power outages that can directly impact your contact center. One example of this was the large Cloudflare outage that occurred a little late in 2024, where a critical data center lost power for an extended amount of time, and that caused a series of other outages. We've also seen fiber cuts and other accidents like this cause large outages as well. And these are especially concerning just because they're so unpredictable. One of the most notable examples that happened was back in 2011, when a 75-year-old woman who was scavenging for scrap metal in the country of Georgia had accidentally dug up a cable and severed almost all of Armenia's internet connectivity, disconnecting almost 3 million people for over 5 hours. Again, completely unprecedented, totally unpredictable. Along with this, we just see plain old human error, right? To err is to human, and things can be misprogrammed or misrouted. An example of this from 2017, there was a contractor who accidentally switched off UPS at an airline's critical data center. It caused a power surge demand when it was switched back on, and this incident grounded their entire fleet and left thousands of passengers stranded. Additionally, all these human error related outages, 85% arise from the failure of existing processes or just a lack of adherence to them. So that kind of speaks to some of that need for automation that maybe needs to occur. Additionally, we see cyber attacks happening more and more. This is a huge cause for concern when it comes to your contact center's resiliency, because networks are often victimized by DDoS attacks, where cyber attacks take down network resources by drowning them in a high volume of malicious traffic. So it's leaving them unable to operate. DDoS attacks increased by about 14% between 2019 and 2021. And also in 2021, there was a DDoS attack every 3 seconds on average. And overall, this can cost organizations up to $20,000 or even $40,000 an hour to address. So huge problem in the industry. And finally, we can also just see local office network congestion. This is a huge cause of contact center downtime. Oftentimes we see this when an office doesn't have enough capacity with their Wi-Fi routers, and most office buildings, including ours here at Bandwidth, are running off of Wi-Fi. And so this means that your calls are also going out over Wi-Fi. And so if you haven't configured those routers appropriately, then you could have an overload as people might be moving around your building. So we're seeing a lot of issues that could cause network outages. And what we really want to talk about today are just what are some of the best practices that you can put in place to help build that flexibility into your network, because things will happen. And what you want to do is not necessarily try to say that we can prevent everything, but just really how can we bend instead of break? How can we adapt before something becomes such a huge issue that we end up losing hours of contact with our customers? So I'm going to pass it to Lauren now, who's going to go into more detail about those best practices and just different ways to build that flexibility and that resilience into your CCAS network. So I'll let Lauren take it away now.
Perfect. Thank you. So as Nellie pointed out with the slide earlier with all the X's on it that looked a lot like this one, carrier redundancy is the first place you have to start. Obviously, traditionally in the olden days, you have one carrier, and if you have one carrier, then you have a failure if that carrier fails. There's no options. So the workaround that was to put a bunch of carriers en route, and that's what you really need to do. You need to have multiple carriers en route in order to truly protect your contact center from the various things that we're talking about. And by the way, when we're thinking about these outages, they're not always total network failures. A lot of times they're an MPA NXX that went out, or a region, Eastern North Carolina, someplace else that went out. It's a portion of a network, and that has a lot of implications for how you manage this, because you've got to know, right? Just one LATA going out might not actually alarm you if you don't have a particularly sophisticated alerts and monitoring system. So there's a lot of implications in terms of the architecture of how you set this up that are really important. Most important, though, is to have a bunch of carriers en route. So a single carrier going down in any way, shape, or form is something that you can route around. And obviously, for those of you who understand contact center and toll-free networks pretty well, you'll know that the way you do this is via Sonos template updates. And those are things that you have to know how to do. So they are things that we do all the time. They are things that take some expertise to be able to do, but things that are really critical if you want to be able to have a fully redundant network. A little statistic, because we love them, 32% of enterprises are planning on having carrier redundancy to enhance performance in 2025. So this number just keeps growing and growing, which leads to the next point, which is to resbord or not to resbord. Interestingly, when I first started at Bandwidth a number of years ago, this was something that large enterprises were grappling with because they saw the need for the carrier redundancy, but the only way to really get that was to do the resbord portion yourself. What they then realized is that's actually really hard. So what does it mean to manage your own resbord? It sounds really easy. You get a contract with one of the folks who can do template management and stuff, and you learn how to do it. It sounds simple, but the implications of that are pretty big. First of all, the disaster recovery is now 100% your responsibility. You have to monitor this 24/7. You've got to have detection networks that can actually detect them. You've got to have people who know how to build these templates and adjust them quickly. These are things that are skill sets that actually take a bit of resource. If you want to do this 24/7, the cognitive load for making sure you've got a staff trained to do that is much higher than you might think. It's not just one or two people. You've also got to manage the capacity on each of these vendors, because you can't reroute to some place that doesn't have the capacity to handle what you just rerouted to. That is something that we have seen a lot with customers who tried to manage themselves. You want to reroute because you've got a problem, but the secondary vendor doesn't have the capacity to handle all those traffic. You've got to constantly be monitoring and making sure that you've got capacity everywhere you need it. Visibility is another one. Your 24/7 NOC not only has to know that you've got regional outages and things like that, but they've got to all be staffed and know how to make the changes and do the changes. Working with carriers means you're probably opening manual tickets and you're probably not getting real-time responses. So that's another factor, that you're not just dealing with a single carrier to try to resolve all these issues. You're literally having to go one by one and try to figure out where the problem is and then go deal with those. So what we find today is the vast majority of our customers do not want to do this anymore and are looking at us to become the resbord for them. So important considerations. There's reasons why you would do it both ways. We support any architecture, by the way, so we are completely fine if folks want to be their own resbord. But again, part of what we're trying to do here today is educate you on what we're seeing with our customer base, what we're seeing in the market. And that is definitely a trend that we are seeing. So, okay, you fixed the call getting to you. You're able to reroute. You're able to get to your own network, but your network has to be pretty solid too. So the basic SBC infrastructure needs to be HA, needs to be active-active, needs to be redundant. So everything you're building in HA pairs. Everything you're building in regional pairs. So you're building a minimum of 4, and in many cases 6 or 8. So for really large contact centers, we see the desire for a high degree of failover, and each one of those failover points needs to be able to handle all the traffic from the other one. So the engineering of this is pretty complex. For folks who manage SBCs every day, this is probably not a big deal for you. But what we're also seeing is that customers are wanting to spend resources in other places and not these basic network infrastructure pieces. So benefits of active-active, again, probably most of you know these, but high fault tolerances, high availability, easy scalability. This is where the cloud really comes in. Having a cloud provider who's running an all IP network is pretty much the only way you're going to be able to scale in any quick time period, and then improve performance. So one of the things that you can leverage if you're working directly with a carrier, and Bandwidth, by the way, is a CLEC, we're a carrier. So when we say we're a carrier, we're a network owning carrier, is that you're going to be able to leverage peered arrangements for all of your traffic. So your calls getting very few hops. This is also really important when we're talking about AI applications, which we'll talk about a little bit later, because no conversation about anything customer service can happen without discussing AI these days. But you really need to have a clean and clear network, and you need to have somebody you can rely on, talk to, and to help you fix problems. Okay, so you've got a great network redundancy, and you've got great redundancy coming into your call system, but you need to be able to actually execute the rerouting. So you need to have advanced routing tools that allow you to easily redistribute traffic, and this is an actual real time. So we're talking milliseconds, we're not talking seconds, minutes, days. You want to be able to fail over from one point to another point, from an entire region to another entire region, and in many cases from one application to another, because the application can fail too. So do you want to have a backup application somewhere, maybe with not all the bells and whistles that your primary contact center has, but something that you could overflow to just as a light IVR in case, and still get to agents in cases of something catastrophic? These are all things you want to be able to control. And in many cases, you want them to happen automatically. So in this case, you're looking at a snap from our dashboard, and you can see, an example of how call routing might work between East Coast, West Coast, and then a final destination, meaning, okay, those two are out, what next? All right, back to you, Nellie.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the bring your own carrier model. And this is really where we start to talk about kind of taking ownership of your whole telephony system and how that can really impact the resilience of your network as well. So the BYOC model is widely adopted for both unified communications and for contact centers. And the model essentially allows you to go direct to carrier for your telephony rather than having to go through the contact center's calling plans. And calling plans can be great, especially for small or medium-sized businesses that maybe don't have as many IT resources or telephony resources internally. But especially as your business begins to scale, those calling plans can sometimes start to feel a little cost prohibitive, or maybe they're just really becoming limited technology-wise as well. And actually, in our enterprise communications landscape report, we surveyed hundreds of telecommunications professionals from across the country, and we found that over 53% of enterprise businesses were starting to go direct to carrier for their telephony. And if we dove deeper into that data, about 49% of the largest enterprises, so those with 5,000 or more employees, were also going the BYOC route. So it can be very advantageous, especially for large enterprises. So just to kind of go over what some of these benefits are, first, you are going to have that enhanced migration control. The BYOC model is going to let you take a more piecemeal approach to cloud migration. So you're setting up those parallel SIP trunks, you're deploying to the CCaaS platform, and then you're able to port numbers from an on-prem to a cloud contact center. But of course, sometimes this can create a little bit of difficulty. Porting can be the riskiest aspect from moving your CX to the cloud. But that's why unbundling that telecom from the CCaaS platform can really give enterprises that greater control over their migration, even to reduce friction when you are moving numbers around. This then gives you that increased flexibility. You have that ability to integrate new and innovative solutions into your tech stack, including things like AI tools that can really help fortify your network resilience as well as your overall CX strategy. The BYOC model also typically results in some pretty significant cost savings because you're consolidating your telecom spend across your CCaaS and even potentially your UCaaS platforms as well. So this type of granular level of control, what it does is it allows you to purchase at scale. So most organizations are not only, they're only paying for the communication services that they're using versus that pay per seat or pay per user package that you typically see in calling plans. And then finally, this can also just improve your overall security. So having more control over your telephony also means having more control over things like encryption, access rules, and the monitoring of your voice channel. So we've talked a lot about the network resilience itself. But as we've mentioned, things still go awry, right? And they go awry all the time. So what's really important is also making sure that you're working within a platform that gives you that up-to-the-minute understanding of your network's functionality and the quality of the calls themselves. And so this is where having call quality data and analytics tools really come into play. If you're able to analyze real-time call metrics, customer service leaders can very quickly identify those issues, they can optimize performance, and then continue to offer a consistent customer experience even during peak demands or peak disruptions. And so when you are considering a carrier that you're going to or a new CX platform, what you really want to think about are some of the following questions. How easily can you view things like MOS scores, all the way down to jitter, latency, and packet loss, right? You can have that overall score, but can you really drill down into where that metric is coming from? Also, can you configure alerts that will help identify when call quality is dropping? Can you filter call quality by direction, right? Inbound, outbound, by location, by a specific number, being able to, again, really drill down into the metric and really determine where call quality might be suffering. And then if you do identify issues, how quickly could you either self-service troubleshooting or be able to get into contact with your provider? Right? Everyone who's on this webinar is an expert in customer service. You're all here because you're customer service professionals, so you know this. This is super top of mind for you. But again, it's something to consider of how quickly would I be able to get the response I need in a timely manner so that my downtime is as low as possible and that we're able to resolve issues quickly when they do occur. All right. And like Lauren said, we can't end a discussion about this without talking about AI. So I'm going to go ahead and let Lauren finish us up with some information about call quality and AI.
We do an enterprise communications landscape survey every year, and it's fascinating to see how this data evolves over time. I think this will not be a surprise for anybody on this call, but it's very interesting to see where people are implementing AI and what that actually means for how you think about building resiliency, flexibility, and future-proofing. Because I think the concept of future-proofing the decisions that you make today to make sure it's also flexible enough to be changed in the future without a huge amount of work is really key in understanding, okay, what are we actually doing with all of these AI tools? What we're really seeing in the contact center space specifically is chatbots. You'd expect that for AI, agent assist, which is not something that a customer is necessarily going to experience. It's going to help the agent deliver a better experience. Call transcriptions, I think, I don't know, me personally, this has been the biggest game changer for me, just in my daily life. Call summarization, this saves agents from having to spend a lot of time, obviously, summarizing calls. These were some of the very first use cases that were put into place with contact centers. You've got voice bots that, with some of this AI infrastructure behind them, are better able to understand context and answer questions. You've got live translations, which has opened up a whole world of multicultural communications with regards to contact centers. And then, of course, sentiment analysis. You want to understand, are people getting frustrated? Are they happy? What's happening? And you can adjust the contact center experience based on that. What all of these things have in common, though, is these are things that you are integrating into your contact center call flow. Some of them are going to be natively provided in the contact center software itself, but this universe is changing, and new AI agents, I think, is probably the best way to describe them. New AI agents are being developed for very bespoke use cases across all industries. And so it is not necessarily a single AI agent that you're going to be using. It's not a single AI agent that you're going to want to be testing. I don't know, there's something like 5,000 different companies now out there. I may have that number wrong by a couple, but that are out there building technologies adjacent to this space. And you want to be able to get them, test them, and then see if they work, integrate them if they do, and integrate them if they don't. And that's really where your telecom provider comes in as your partner. So some questions to ask yourself here as we close, to sort of wrap up all of the concepts that we've been talking about. Do you have multiple carriers en route? I think we all agree that is a critical first step before you do anything else, pass go. Does your carrier have tools that allow you to reroute in real time or near real time? And again, we talked about certain changes at the SOMOS level. If people tell you those things are happening in real time, they're probably not telling you the truth, but you can make them happen really fast if you know what you're doing. Also tools to reroute just within your network itself if you've got problems there. Is your core contact center network, whether it's on-prem, cloud, hybrid, architected to be HA? Is it geographically redundant? Do you have real-time alerting and reporting on usage anomalies and fraud attempts? Finally, and this is an area that is changing so often and so frequently that we see our customers really having a hard time keeping up. Are you compliant with applicable regulations, PCI data, HIPAA, GDPR? As we're marching into this world where we're using large data sets to try to understand context behind customers, it is ripe with the ability to cross the boundaries of what's actually allowed with these various regulations. So you have to be really careful, and hopefully you're working with a provider that can help you navigate those things. All right, so now we're going to turn it over to some questions. Hopefully you guys can pop some questions in the chat. I looked a little bit at the attendance list before we started today. I think I know some of you that are out there. So hopefully we've got some questions out there that we can answer. I see a couple coming in. So Nellie, why don't you, we'll figure out who's asking what and we'll try to get some answers to you.
Yeah, and of course, if you come up with any questions during this time, again, the chat box will stay open, so please feel free to leave your question in there. We do have a few. So the first question I'm seeing, Lauren, is what are some of the biggest challenges you see when people are moving to the cloud? Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of things come to mind. Typically, when you're doing an infrastructure migration, it is a huge project plan. It is a huge project plan. There's so many pieces involved. We work every day on project plans with our customers because we are a very important piece of that project plan, but we are not the entire part of that project plan. So making sure that you've got the whole thing coordinated. So when you're ready to move numbers, when you're ready to port, you're ready to do that. So what we see, if you don't architect it properly, is you don't want to be in a situation where you're migrating and you can't migrate back. So it's really important to be having your numbers living in a place where you can manage them and move them back and forth and reroute them in real time, reroute them between platforms. We've seen situations where customers have implemented, they thought they had testing it. You know, everybody on this call probably tests this stuff till the cows come home. One UC application that was pretty funny, though, one of the executives was on PTO, came back, had a new system, and was like, I hate this, I don't want this, I don't want to use it. And so they had to move that person back for a while, for like a week, till they trained him and moved him back. That's a minor example. You multiply that by 1,000 of what we see on a contact center, trying to get all of those call flows mapped over to your new platform. How are you going to do that? What do you need the carrier to do? What does the platform itself do? These are all big questions that have to be answered as we're thinking about these migrations, whether it's on-prem to cloud. We see more and more cloud to cloud now, and we see a lot of hybrid deployments as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Lauren. That was a really good answer. So our next, I see a question here that says, do you have a recommended contact center to work with for network resilience? We get this one a lot, but I'll let you respond.
I know. I don't know if this is a good analogy or not, but I think of this one as we don't pick our favorite child. No parent picks their favorite child. But what we really mean by that is each one of the cloud platforms has really great things about it, right? They have strengths. They all have strengths. They all have weaknesses. And it really depends on what you need out of that platform. What we also see is very few people pick one. So there was one study, and I'm trying to remember the statistic from a couple of years ago, where a large enterprise is likely to have something like 12 to 13, somewhere in that range, different enterprise applications involved in some portion of their UC and CC platforms, if you put those things together. So that might include an IVR in front of the call, the contact center itself. Companies constantly are merging and buying other companies, so they're running different platforms. Then they're migrating to the cloud, so they're different platforms. They might be using one platform for their internal communications and another one for their conference calling. So you want to be able to manage all of these. And then they want to be able to do it increasingly without infrastructure, without having to have session border controllers, without having to try to do that all themselves. So what we see there, so a long story to say, we don't pick, but we work with them all. And our goal is really to be able to facilitate whatever platform is best for you. We used to just say UC and CC, but I think it's incomplete to say that now because there's so much more. You want to be able to, there's third-party emergency services platforms, there's third-party PCI and payment platforms. And most importantly, there are third-party AI platforms, 5,000 of them maybe, that you could theoretically turn around and plug into your contact center contact flow. So we don't want to pick one. We want to be able to do them all.
Yep, absolutely. All right, I'm seeing one more question. It says, do you know how often you have to reroute traffic on average? And I know for us, we have a specific number. I think you were looking that up the other day.
Yeah. So you might find this incredible. I don't know. Some people may find this surprising. I was shocked when I heard this number. We make over 3,000 adjustments to templates in a year.
Wow.
So if you think about that, it's like almost one a day. Or 2 a day, excuse me. Oh, well, what did I do? Didn't that math? 3,000, 10 a day.
Yeah.
10 a day. So these are adjustments we make all the time. Why do we make them? We make them not just because of outages, we also monitor the quality. And if we see quality degrading, then we will make those modifications. There are also some times where cost is a factor. We're able to leverage different carriers for different routes that are less expensive. Again, we have our own network, so obviously we leverage our own network most of the time, but we want to keep all these networks in play, keep the capacity available, so that if we need them, that capacity is there.
Yeah. All right. I think I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A. So if that's all of the questions, then I think we'll go ahead and wrap up for today. So I want to give a big thank you to you, Lauren, for joining today and sharing your expertise. And thank you to everyone who joined us here today. Again, you will receive a recording of today's webinar, so be on the lookout in your email. Make sure it's not going to spam or junk. It should be coming directly from us here at Bandwidth. And again, you're always welcome to check us out at bandwidth.com and reach out to us if you have more questions. But once again, thank you to Lauren and thank you to all of you. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.